Okay, so I know that all I've been doing since the start of the game has been playing sword, but you have to understand other decks are actually expensive, so I have to only play one deck. I can almost afford another deck, but some contrarian in me doesn't really want to play artifact. I'll see if I cave at some point. Anyway, today I'm playing sword again. This is not the same video, of course. The deck lists have undergone some changes, and more importantly, I actually made it to a diamond group using this deck, so I would say I'm gotten a bit more understanding. Plus, the meta is very different from the first day now, so there's a lot to cover, I guess. So let's look at the deck list we're playing for today first. So this is the list we're running for today. You can see it's very different from what it was yesterday. Well, I think it's very different anyway. We made some changes to make it lean a bit stronger into the late game for the simple reason that it's a bit harder to get aggro to go off and just win games. Of course, against the main meta decks right now, which is Artifact, Portal, and Rune, your best bet is kind of to just go for an aggressive game plan and hope you can win that way. So we still run a heavy amount of 2-cost. You can in fact run more 2-cost if you want to lean more heavily into the aggro game plan, but this deck is more designed so that you can still play it decently well into the late game as well, which is why we have a lot of copies of stuff like Geno, who is very strong in the late game because he can clear 2 followers without spending an evil point, and if your opponent leaves him alive, you can just kill your opponent with Geno. And Malia also similarly much stronger in the late game, and if she survives, you can keep summoning followers to keep protecting her and make your opponent's life suffering if she doesn't outright kill your opponent. And then yeah, we run one of Centaur now because having Storm before turn 9 helps you cheese out a lethal before your opponent gets to play Orcus. So that's what Centaur is there for, I guess. And also just because they have an extra Storm, because you are still trying to play aggressively as your main win con, just because the decks Spellboost, Rune, and Artifact are just quite strong in the late game, so it's a bit hard to try to out-resource them and win that way. It's not impossible, but it's a bit hard, so we're running that. Of course, we still have Apollo because Sword is still one of the decks that I find on the ladder now. If you don't play against Sword or Forest, you can consider taking out Apollo, but the moment you take him out, you will play against Sword, and then they will play the Zirconia on turn 4, and you will wish you had him. That's just how the game works. Yeah, let's look at some games I have for you today. So our first match here, we are going second against Portal. Contrary to what is logical, going second is actually better for aggro in this game because Zirconia is very strong on your turn 4, and you also have access to extra play point to push out more followers to overwhelm your opponent with. So that's how it works. Against both Portal and Rune, at least you want to mulligan for aggressive early game if you're going second, so we want to keep Zirconia. Iron Crown is good for summoning followers, and if somehow your opponent doesn't answer your board, you can just buff it instead. Other than that, we want a 2-drop. Unfortunately, we do not pick out a 2-drop here. Cheating out 2-drop on turn 1 is a pretty standard play for this deck because you can pressure your opponent, and we only run, well, ideally we only run 2-drops that have 2 defense. We have the Samurai, but you're not even supposed to play a Samurai here anyway, so yeah. Unfortunately, we don't pick out a 2-drop here, so we will use Iron Crown Majesty to line up some followers to hopefully buff with Zirconia if they live long enough. Unfortunately, my opponent does have a pretty decent hand for clearing up early aggro, so we might not get there. Obviously, aggro is your game plan, but if I just pick the game where I win by just aggroing their face, I think I already have those games in the previous video probably, so I think it's better off showing games where things don't go quite according to plan. Here my opponent is doing pretty well for themselves. They got Puppet Theater for more puppets to answer my board. So we do end up going to the Zirconia here just because we want to force our opponent to deal with our board. Of course, if my opponent does have the what's her face, the 5-cost that can summon one of the big artifacts from the hand. My opponent does have that. I'm probably quite annoyed, but thankfully it looks like they didn't. They do go ahead and evolve the Elise. I should probably mention this matchup is super bad if your opponent knows what they're doing and if they draw well, so gotta keep that in mind, I guess. So here my opponent does trade in, but they do leave some of our knights on board, so we can focus on that. Here we go ahead and drop Albert. This seems a bit ridiculous. We just evo face with Albert, but we do have another we don't have another Albert. Sorry, let me I'm doing a bad job explaining. So basically the idea from here is that if it goes to late game, I'm not winning like generally, because Artifact is super once they get their board clears online, we're kind of screwed. So my best hope is actually just to evolve Albert here and keep pushing them in the face. Here, if they want to play the 5 cost the board clear, they will have to trade it into Albert and make it super low as well. So we put them on the defensive here, and while we aggressively push their face, the idea is of course to finish them with Centaur. My opponent will fuse, and they'll use Bullet from Beyond to clear my Albert, which is fine because, I mean, well, it's not fine, but it's not the worst thing ever. They do trade here, and here we hit them with the Swordcraft special. We drop Vials here and just super evo him. The reason why we can get away with this is because most Portal players don't run away to clear Vials. The only thing they can do is to play the 5 cost and summon 2 of the AoE artifacts, but I don't think they have enough artifacts in hand for that. You can see my opponent here is just trying to heal up with the Ominous artifact, but thankfully we have the Centaur in hand, which we can cheat out with extra play points. So this is why we play the Centaur, because you can do this. That's it for this game. So we continue our streak of aggro not going well. Here is a game against, we are going first against Rune. Once again, we do want to aggro them, but honestly going first, especially against Rune, I don't have too much hope of getting a good aggro game because they can just cheat out Angrea and ruin my life that way. We do have Vials in hand though, so you definitely want to try to make good use of that to answer that Angrea should they play it. No early game followers, so we do have to pass the first 2 turns, so our aggro game plan is dead. We are definitely looking at a long game here, so that's what we should be shifting to. We drop the dog here just to, I don't know, annoy them, I guess. They don't really have a good way to clear this dog unless they use the Stormy Blast, so we can just put it here and just poke them in the face with it. And Zirconia's not great going first either, so just dump the Zirconia here. Hopefully we can force them to trade in weirdly. And here they drop Runeblade Conductor, which you don't generally see in Rune. Frankly, if they had Angrea here and then they just like kept drawing good cards like Angrea and Kuon, there is no way I'm winning. Because the matchup is also bad. So yes, I'm playing Sword in a meta where 2 of the best decks are Rune and Portal, but the matchup is bad against both of them. Of course, if you can aggro them down, then you can win still. So there's that. That's probably the only reason why people still play Sword. Just so you can aggro people down before they get to do anything. Yeah, so we just go ahead and, well, try to aggro them down with Evolving Apollo here. Having 2 big followers is good because Kuon can answer 1. But the other one, they sort of have to invest more resources into here. Especially if they have more than 4 defense, then your opponent can't just use the Demonic Shikigami to clear it. They have to invest a bit more, like, for example, Paper Shikigami. In this case, they use Celestial, so we managed to block 4 damage face by evolving the Apollo, which I would say is pretty good. And we won't miss the evo point too much either, because we have a decent amount of ways to clear followers without using our evo points. Here we just use the Fildal here just to clear. Fildal, right? Yeah, Fildal to clear the Kuon. Use the Vials as well. This way we can save our super evo points for later. And we also have a bunch of very powerful followers like Gino and Amalia still in our hand. So we are quite fine. So here's a bit of a pause from my opponent. I guess they're using the heal up and set up. Maybe they just didn't have another cool one, but this is another reason why Centaur is nice to have. It's just when your opponent is like doing like a mid-turn like this, we can just drop Centaur and punch them in the face. This gives you something to do. I guess we don't really want to play. I guess we can play Amalia maybe, but I think we sort of want to save Amalia to clear because Rune does have very big AoEs followers with the one that AoE is based on Spellboost. So if you drop Amalia, they just play there and your Amalia was wasted completely. So we don't want that. So Centaur was pretty good there, is the point I'm trying to make. Here we'll use the Samurai to clear the Kuon as well. Once again, we continue to hold on to our Super Evo. We can cheese a Super Evo Geno or Amalia on board and my opponent can't answer it. We can look for a win that way, or I just save a Super Evo for lethal with Albert, for example. It's pretty valuable. See my opponent's cooking here. They've played, is that their second climb? Right now we have to keep track of their resources. They've played 2 Kuons and 2 Climbs, so they still have Anangrea, I guess, which is, there you see it. And they still have probably more Blaze Destroyers as well. So at this point we are fully on the defensive. We are actually just trying to outlast their big swing cards, which is surprisingly doable if your opponent doesn't go too hard on you from the beginning. If we clear a bunch of their followers, we can draw a Jano on board. We still save our evil point here, which is very valuable. And that's my opponent's last cooldown, so we don't have to worry about cooldown anymore. They still have Anangrea and more dimension climbs as well though, so there's that. And hopefully they don't run Cocytus, but if they do, then we are probably going to lose because Cocytus in Rune is very strong. Okay, we'll just drop the Amalia. I see sort of a chance to just try to hide the super evolved Amalia behind wards here. Of course, if my opponent has the AoE, they have the AoE, but I have to try to like win the game at some point, and in this case she also clears bot, so it's not like I wasted her by playing her here. There's the Radiant Rainbow, and there's Anangrea, which is fine because that is not. And there's the Declimb, so that's their last Declimb as well. And they'll play a Truth Summons to summon a Golem and Miss Miranda as well. And they do have William, so the AoE will clear. But they've spent a lot of cards here. This is their second Anangrea. Their second William as well, I believe. Is it their second or is it their first? It's one of those numbers. So we play Amida to draw, of course. And then we sort of pull off this trick. This is a very nice thing that you should remember how to do is Amelia with Magus, and then you give them all the barrier. This board is super annoying to get through for your opponent. Most opponents that aren't dragon have to actually invest a fair amount of resources and time to clearing this board. If dragon, they can just play Twilight Dragon and just clear the whole thing for free, but you know, can't really do anything about that. Yeah, they did invest a bunch of resources. We are still cooking those, so we go ahead and use the Samurai, and we use Gino as well. So at this point they've played 2 Williams, 2 Anangreas, all their cool ones and their Decline. Surely they are out of stuff for this. And my opponent can't answer the Gino, so they concede. Our last match for today is the Mirror, and of course we want to keep Apollo in the Mirror. If we're going second, we want to be aggressive because we are taking the lead here if we're going second in the Mirror. It's so weird to conceive of, but going second is actually, I think, stronger in the Mirror. So yeah, we play Ruby here to search into our deck for like a strong card to play next turn. Unfortunately, we don't have a strong card. We have Ignominious Samurai. This is the Battle Pass card, by the way, in case you've never seen it. It's just Ignominious Samurai, which is a guy in the normal art, so yeah, don't need to get confused there. My opponent plays the Lyrala here. We did end up cutting Lyrala because I don't know, she just didn't feel super good to play, so we did cut her. And here we are trying to maintain some board presence. We don't have to worry about aggro as much in this match because with careful play we can sort of outlast them with resources. But this is the Mirror, so I guess it ends up being a skill diff if that happens. In this case though, we have Zirconia, so we are going to play Zirconia because Zirconia is very strong. And we go ahead and get rid of the Luminous Lancer here because the Lancer is the real threat, because if paired with Zirconia they can clear my board easily, so that is why we get rid of the Lancer. There is their Zirconia as well, which they will trade. And they will trade again, which is fine. We are definitely ahead though, so we want to force them to clear here, so we continue applying pressure with our second Zirconia. You see Zirconia is very strong in the Mirror. We go ahead and punch them in the face and force them to be the one trading. So there is their Amelia. We will evolve the Amelia here. And use Iron Crown as well to buff their board so they can clear my high health followers, leaving me 2-2 on the board. Now we can super evil here. This is a misplay, by the way. I should not have returned Geno. I should probably explain this. You can see our board is 2-2. 2-2, so we have 4 damage on board now. If we want to push aggressiveness, which we sort of do want to, we want to super evolve the Knight and go face. That puts them at 7. So what we actually should be doing is keeping Geno. So on the off chance my opponent lines up wards, I can just super evolve Geno, trade 2 times, and that's still 2 more damage that we need. So bit of a misplay there. Yeah, let's keep going. You can go ahead and use the Apollo here to clear their follower while maintaining pressure by super evolving on board and punching them in the face. And I believe my opponent can't fully answer this board, so they end up conceding, but you'll see them try to look for an answer here. Yep. So those are all the games I have for today. Hopefully it gave you some idea of how this deck works and why I am running it this way. Of course, if you lean it to more aggressive game plan, you might be able to win more against Artifact and Rune. But I feel like I just don't like playing aggro decks where like the first few turns what you draw determines how the entire game goes. I just want to be able to like sort of play into the late game a bit more, and having long games where you manage resources carefully to answer your opponent's board is just more fun, I think. So that's why we're playing a more late game heavy deck. If you want to play a more aggressive deck, that's up to you. Aggressive decks are probably also cheaper. Funnily enough, I think this list is actually cheaper than the previous one because we took out the Olivia and we took out the Olivias because just wanted better cards, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that's it for today. See you next time. Bye bye.